Take another photograph and document a life that's right. And ways consist of simple things, the days of black and white. And faces from a humble past.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back yet again to Talkin Guff podcast with me, your host, Ruben Django Pouch. How are you all getting on out there in the wild world? I'll tell you right, we're going to get straight into it. And we're going to talk about my old mate, Russell Brand. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'm going to tell you that I've already done a podcast on this subject. I edited the podcast and I even posted the podcast or uploaded it to YouTube. I then deleted the podcast, and I suppose the reason I deleted said podcast is that I felt that I was just giving a recap of what we already know. I felt like I was just recapping the information that has been coming at us for over a week now. I would probably be prudent of me to mention that this is now the Monday week following the accusations and the revelations about Russell Brand. Okay, and I felt that in the podcast that I did and subsequently deleted, that I hadn't really given enough of my opinion. Do you know what I mean? Like that wasn't the priority of the podcast. That almost like the priority of the podcast was communicating to people the narrative that we're already fully aware of at this stage. And I wanted to maybe bring it back, pull it back a bit, and have a look at the whole picture and give my sort of opinion on certain factors of the situation rather than just the narrative itself. Do you understand where I'm coming from? I'm going to start off by just explaining who Russell Brand is to me, okay? Obviously, like, I'm 39 years of age, so I remember when Russell Brand first came on the scene in and around the year 2000, and he was going, my first interaction, or the first time I remember being aware of who Russell Brand was via MTV, and he would go to dance events like Creamfields, etc., and this is in around the time when Ministry of Sound and stuff like that was huge, you know. And he would go to these events, these concerts, festivals, etc., the electronic music or techno festivals, whatever way you want to describe them, and talk fucking Purple Monkey dishwasher nonsense to mad out of it and like totally leave them perplexed and vexed. Now, I'm not going to say that I was a massive fan of Russell Brand at the time. It's not that I was not a fan or that I didn't like him. I just was indifferent potentially to what it was he was doing. I just thought it was a bit funny and a bit interesting seeing him talk to all them fucking spangle-faced mad out of it's and confusing the shite out of them. Then obviously over the next 10 years, Russell Brand was a stand-up comedian. He worked for Channel 4 doing Big Brother's Big Mouth. He was on things like 8 out of 10 Cats, Big Fat Quiz of the Year, those sort of British panel comedy shows, and I actually found him to be quite entertaining within that dynamic or environment, those sort of panel comedy shows that, in fairness to Britain, in the UK, they're fairly good at them, and they can be quite entertaining. But I wasn't following everything that Russell Brand did. I wasn't like an avid Russell Brand fan. I watched some of his stand-up, thought parts of it were really funny, parts of it I was indifferent to, which would be the same case for a lot of comedians that I watch, especially like I would just say, for instance, Dave Chappelle. I don't think that everything Dave Chappelle says is funny or enlightening, but I think when he is funny and when he is enlightening, that it is above and beyond a lot more, many more of his sort of counterparts in the comedy world. And the thing about Russell Brand is, like, I found some of what he said in his stand-up to be really funny and some of it not funny. But I don't mean like, oh, that's not funny. I mean, I just wasn't laughing at it, you know? Obviously, Russell Brand made made some level of impact on Hollywood. He married Katy Perry. He was in movies like Rock of Ages, Get Him to the Greek, and a couple of other Judd Apatow productions. He was in a remake of Arthur. Who was the original Arthur? Dudley Moore, I believe. But and look, you know, he was entertaining enough in some of those aforementioned Hollywood productions. But the point I'm trying to make is I became actually a really big fan of Russell Brand after that period of time. I was... I just had a baby, so we're talking 2012. I just had a baby. I was trying my best, fighting for survival, and I will just say that was one of the scariest times in my life, being a sort of like a guy who just wanted to play music and party to suddenly being a guy who was responsible for another human being and with not very many prospects. And I was sort of, it made me more aware of sort of social, political and financial injustices throughout my environment and further afield. And the point I'm making, I suppose, is that that's why I connected the way I did with Russell Brand in and around 2012, because he was doing stuff like The Trues. And obviously there's a narrative going around that Russell Brand was aware of accusations that would, or potential accusations coming down the pipeline. And the reason he started to do his YouTube endeavours was to bolster a large fan base to help him combat these accusations when they finally came to the forefront. I think that's a ridiculous narrative, and I think it holds no water, and it is not bolstered by any sort of evidence, because as far as I'm concerned, Russell Brand started doing what he does now. He started his online presence or his online journey. He started critiquing the establishment and mainstream media and the financial systems we have in place at the moment long before 4 years ago. And that's when I really started to connect with Russell Brand, when he started doing The Trues, and he has walked that path of potential righteousness since then, in my opinion. And like I said, or like as a result of that, I have a huge amount of respect for Russell Brand. I see Russell Brand as someone who was entangled or entwined in the sort of Hollywood or the Hollyweird environment, and I believe he became disenchanted with where he had ended up with his lot, as it were. I believe he was unsatisfied by the Hollywood experience and the potentially nefarious, at the very most, sort of fake and conceited sort of energy, you know. And I believe that once he saw through the looking glass of Hollywood, that he was just like, this isn't for me, and I'm going to divorce Katy Perry, because she is almost the personification of what I have a problem with. She is the personification of this environment that I don't want to be a part of. So I'm going to get rid of her. I'm going to change my path. I'm going to change my direction, and I'm going to use my position of power. I don't know if power is the right word, but influence, shall we say, to do good in the world. And I feel Russell Brand has been doing that for 10 years. And I think that fact in and of itself refutes the idea that he has only been doing what he has been doing with regards to his online presence, with regards to his journey of truth. I would refute the claim that he's only been doing that for the last 4 years in order to garner some support for inevitable sexual allegations. Because the reason, like I've just said, that I refute those claims is he's been doing it for 10 years, if not longer, okay? And he's also, like I said, used that position of influence in other ways. He has also used it to raise awareness for housing issues in the UK. He has used it to raise money and resources for multiple women's projects and charities, etc., and other projects, social projects and charities. And so, look, all right, so that's who Russell Brand is to me. Like I said, in the previously recorded and subsequently deleted episode of this podcast, or version of this podcast that I've done, I spent a lot of time going through the information that we're already fully aware of. And that sort of stifled my own ability to form an opinion, or the priority was upon relaying all of that information that you're already aware of, rather than the information that I have inside of me, in me noodle. And so, what are the accusations? Obviously, Russell Brand had posted a video previous to the accusations becoming live or going public, shall we say. In that video, he seriously refuted the claims. He said that they were linked, or from a time when he was extraordinarily promiscuous, that he has always been transparent about that promiscuity, and that irrespective of his promiscuity, that the relationships he was involved with were always fully consensual. Okay, so that's his take on it. And remember, this is before we were made privy to the exact content of the allegations, right? And that was on a Friday week ago. And then sometime over the weekend, I think Saturday and Sunday, between the Sunday Times and Dispatches, we were made aware of the actual allegations. Okay, now it is alleged, or it is the narrative is that there are 4 women with accusations of sexual assault, rape, and emotionally abusive behaviour. Okay. Just straight off the mark, I'm going to say that I don't agree with the idea of emotionally abusive behaviour, that is one of said allegations, because for me, that's sort of unquantifiable. That's perspective based, and there is no sort of way to substantiate that. And so for me, it's a little bit irrelevant and should potentially not be part of the accusations, because it just seems to try and add more weight to the idea that this is the character of this person and this is what this person does. There are 4 women involved in the allegations. One is a girl called Rachel. Her name has been changed, and her appearance was blacked out and her voice was changed in order to keep her anonymous. She claims that she was sexually assaulted whilst a junior member of staff for Channel 4's Big Brother's Big Mouth, or an Endemol production, as far as I'm aware. And she claims that Russell Brand exposed his penis to her, and that was the sexual assault, that she was shook, that she was anxious, that she was afraid of professional repercussions, and most certainly did not want to rock the boat. She also, strange enough, because she's presented as a junior member of staff, she also referred to herself that she felt like the baby of the team, right? And again, her age hasn't been given, and she's been presented as a junior member of staff. Now, my problem with this accusation is that after the alleged sexual assault, after he had exposed his genitals to her, she went on to have a consensual sexual relationship with Russell Brand. And I would argue potentially that if you felt that him exposing himself was a sexual assault, you would not go on to have a consensual sexual relationship with him. I find it hard to believe that you were scared, shocked, and anxious if you go on to have a sexual relationship with the man. So I would straight off the mark say, and I could be wrong about this, but I would just straight away be like, no, I'm sorry, that person's accusation must be stricken from the record. There has been no sexual assault here, in my opinion. Okay? Another one of the accusers is a woman called Alice. Now, Alice claims, because it's very important to say, like, these are all accusations. This has all been claimed, okay? And Alice claims, and again, Alice is not her real name. She has been, her name has been changed, her voice has been changed, and her appearance has been blacked out. So obviously her account, her accusations are being given anonymously. Now, her claim is that she met Russell Brand when she was 16 and had a consensual sexual relationship with him. Now, obviously, as soon as I read that, I was like, oh, fuck, he's going to jail. Because in this country, in Ireland, the consensual age for sex is 17, but in the UK it's not. In the UK, the consensual age for sex is 16. Okay? So, this woman claims that Russell Brand and herself entered into a consensual sexual relationship when she was 16. Her parents knew about it, and that somewhere in the midst of that 3 or 4 month relationship, she was sexually assaulted by Russell Brand. Now, her main thing is that she was groomed for sex at 16 and sexually assaulted by Russell Brand. The sexual assault, unfortunately, is ambiguous in nature. According to Alice, she was sat in the bed, much like I am now, with her back against the headboard when Russell Brand forced his penis down her throat. She goes on to say she couldn't breathe. She was gagging. She tried to push him away and eventually had to punch him in the stomach in order to get him off her. Now, I'll just say again, reiterate that that's an accusation. That's what she says happened, okay? And it's a serious enough allegation. But the reason I've said that it's somewhat ambiguous is because this person is in, at the time of the assault, a consensual sexual relationship. Now, I don't want to promote the narrative that men can't rape their wives or sexually assault their partners or sexually assault people they are in consensual sexual relationships with, but it is also difficult to discern when these moments of intimacy, these sexual moments that are one thing for one person and another thing for another, are brought forward as sexual assault. It's very difficult to discern what could actually have happened there. Obviously, the parameters are not the same for what we would assume to be a sort of open and shut case of rape. Didn't know the woman, attacked her on the street, raped her. You know, that would be potentially easier for me, and I might be wrong here, you know, and maybe there's an element of this I don't understand, but that would be potentially easier for me to understand or wrap my head around, as opposed to the forcing of the penis down the throat, because there's a disconnect there as well within the narrative. There's a step or two missing between having your head against, or your back, being sat in the bed with your back against the headboard, and having a penis shoved down your throat. There's a couple of steps that are missing there, and I mean, and so the point I'm trying to make is, how could it be ambiguous? Because this guy, say for instance, take it aside from the fact it's Russell Brand and she's 16, he's 30. What if you were with someone and you were like, oh, I really want to sort of just push my, you know what I mean? Push my penis down here a bit, because a lot of lads enjoy to have their penises sucked in that way. Gok 3000, like, you know, you know, and so I can see that is a situation that is played out in more than one relationship, where the guy's like, here, why don't you do a bit like that? And she's like, oh, get off me, I fucking don't like that. And if she doesn't like that, then it's a no-go. But is that a sexual assault? Or, you know what I mean? I think the lines are potentially blurred in a situation like this, where sexual assault is sexual assault or something I don't like in the bedroom, right? But obviously, if it's upsetting for that woman, it's upsetting for that woman, and we can't belittle it. But I'm just trying to discern, is it a sexual assault or not? And I would like to have other people's opinions on that. What do they think about that specific case? One part of what that girl or woman says is that Russell Brand groomed her for sex. And now, look, I'll just start off by saying I don't think a 30-year-old man should be able to have a consensual sexual relationship with a 16-year-old girl. I think minimum the age of consent should be 18 years of age. And that's a point this girl Alice is making, and I completely agree with that point. But if someone has a consensual sexual relationship with the person who's 16 and that's above the age of consent, then there's not really any issue here. No, certainly no crime has been committed. And in order, I don't want to belittle it, but like the only issue at play here is the age of consent, and I agree with that issue. But if you have a problem with the age of consent, your problem is not with people who work within the constraints of that consent or that law. Your problem is with the lawmakers themselves, and I support you fully if you want to criticise or petition those lawmakers to raise the age of consent. I'm 100% with you. But the idea that meeting someone when you are of consensual sexual age and having sex with that person, the idea that they've groomed you, for me, I don't agree. I would have to disagree. I would have assumed that grooming is something that happens pre-consensual age of sex. Like, you know, Philip Schofield meets a 13-year-old boy, befriends him, stays friends with him, wait till he's of consensual age and has sex with him. That for me is grooming. Meeting a person who is of age and entering into a consensual sexual relationship with that person is not grooming, in my opinion. Okay? And that matters. That is important. That's an important bit of information for us to get our heads around, because grooming is like, it's pedophile shit. And although I don't agree with the 30-year-old man having sex with a 16-year-old woman, in the eyes of the law, there's been no pedo shit going on here. And I just think it's a bit of a serious statement to be throwing around. And also, I forgot to mention that Rachel, who claims that she was sexually assaulted by Russell Brand and then went on to have a consensual sexual relationship, she is also communicating that she has been groomed for sex by Russell Brand. That's how she feels about the situation. She has been groomed for sex. Now, that girl, Rachel, who was groomed for sex, not Alice, who was 16, Rachel, she was 24 years of age when she met Russell Brand and had a consensual sexual relationship with her. So obviously, like, she wasn't groomed whatsoever. And I mean, I think it's negligent for the people who create these, for the producers of dispatches and for the editors of the Times, not to cut that part out. And in fact, not only did they not cut that part out, they don't make us aware of her age. They make us aware of Alice's age straight away. They present Rachel as a junior member of staff. She claims to have been groomed by Brand. Turns out she was 24 at the time. So I think it was lacking integrity for them not to tell us what age Rachel was. It's lacking in integrity for them to allow Rachel to call Russell Brand a groomer when she was 24 years of age when she met him. That's my opinion. I think 100%. And that's my opinion. Look, so there, now right there we spoke about Alice and Rachel, and we'll just quickly move on and talk about there's another allegation. I think her name is Phoebe, and she has consensual sex with Russell Brand, and then gets a job from Russell Brand. She admits that she was jealous of Russell Brand's sexual exploits during the time in which she worked for him. This is post having consensual sex with him, and then she goes out with Russell Brand one evening, having left her belongings in his house, goes back to his house with him. At which point she says he gets naked, gets on top of her on the bed, and tries aggressively to have sex with her in some sort of almost sexual blackout thing. She sort of goes, "Hey, fucking stop, what are you at?" And he snaps out of it, and nothing else happens after that situation. This is pertaining to in around 2010, 2012. I don't know. I mean, obviously it's not rape. Is that classed as sexual assault? Obviously, yeah, no, it is, I suppose. And again, this is just an allegation. This is just what Phoebe has said, but I'm just trying to discern in my head. And that would be a sexual allegation if that in fact turned out to be true. And the last person that is interviewed with regards to sexual assault and rape is a woman called Nadia. Oh yeah, Phoebe is not Phoebe's name. Phoebe has been played by an actress, and Phoebe is also making these allegations anonymously. Okay. And then Nadia is an American woman. She, in around the same time as the Phoebe situation, she is living in LA. She meets Russell Brand. She has consensual sex with Russell Brand. Sometime after that consensual sex, returns to Russell Brand's house, where she claims to have been raped by Russell Brand. Okay? She also apparently went to a rape crisis centre the next day, although the parameters of that are somewhat blurred. And here's the thing, because we don't actually ever see the report. We see unredacted lines from a supposed report from the rape crisis centre. For me, it would have held more water for me had someone sort of sat there and gone, look, here's this bit, here's this bit, here's this bit, and this supports the narrative or the story of the accusation. There's also some follow-up text messages with regards to this accusation, and they're tricky in and of themselves, because I will say that the text messages, which apparently are confirmed to come from Russell Brand's phone, according to the Dispatch's documentary, they're the only thing that you could even point to as evidence, as it were, because we hear Russell Brand apologizing for something. He says, that was crazy and selfish of me. I know you're a good person. I hope you have the heart to forgive me, or you can find it in yourself to forgive me. He says something along those lines. I'm potentially paraphrasing. She writes back something like, you scared the shit out of me, blah, 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 blah. No means no. I pride myself on making good decisions. This was a bad decision. And do I have to go get tested? Because what it then sounds like almost, well, that's twofold. She made a bad decision, so she had a choice and made a decision. That's one thing you could take from the text message. Another thing you could take from the text message is that she was upset that he had ejaculated inside her as a result of not wearing a condom. When they had previously had consensual sex, he was like, condom, no condom. She was like, condom, of course. And they used the condom that time. She said that potentially he was uninterested by the endeavour because he had to wear said condom. But, and again, that's just what she says. But you could read it, this text as like, no means no. But yeah, I have to say that I don't think that what she says is something you would say to someone who raped you. It seems like it's something you would say to someone who let you down, upset you, and you could say, yeah, well, raping someone would upset them and let them down. But it just doesn't seem as that's the severity of the situation, just from the way she talks. And I could be totally wrong by that. And in my opinion, the way he deals, his parts of the text don't sound like something you'd say to a person you just raped. It sounds like something you'd say to a person you potentially crossed the line with. And so, could the text confirm the rape, or could they confirm a different narrative where he was meant to wear a condom and he didn't, and he ejaculated inside her? And so, because definitely the emphasis on the rape crisis thing is that there was antibiotics, tests, etc. And so, yeah, it does. It sort of hangs the onus on the ejaculation rather than the sex act. And that makes me potentially question that narrative. And another thing is that some people argue, and I don't know because I'm not an expert in like graphic design or anything, but some people argue that there is discrepancies between the way the body of her text messages, or text message adds up, and they believe in fact that parts have been cut out, and what we see now is actually been copied and pasted together. I don't know about that because I'm not an expert, but the text message for me just doesn't like confirm or deny the accusation. I'm just going to say this, right, is that there's not really, or maybe potentially zero evidence to substantiate or prove these accusations and allegations of sexual assault and rape. There is no, like I said, there's no evidence, and not only is there no evidence to support these claims, really, in my opinion, but the women making these claims have been granted full anonymity by the production company in question and the paper, and I have a problem with that. I have a problem with women being able to, or anyone, man or woman, being able to make such heinous accusations and allegations about someone without having to disclose who they are in any way and without having any evidence to substantiate these claims. I also feel it's a bit of a red flag that every one of the women who accuses Russell Brand of sexual assault and rape was involved in a consensual sexual relationship with him, or had, in previous to these accusations, had consensual sex. And what does anyone else think of that? Is that symptomatic of my subconscious misogyny that I just am looking, that, like the idea that these women all had sex with Russell Brand consensually at some point, the fact that makes me second guess their accusations, is that symptomatic of some sort of male privilege or patriarchy or etc etc etc? What do you think out there in the big bad world? Obviously these accusations have been levelled at Russell Brand not via any sort of judicial system, not via the police, but via the media. I suppose I have a problem with that. I have a problem with, or these women making these heinous allegations and accusations against Russell Brand that date back 10 and 15 years. My problem with that situation is compounded by the fact that there's no evidence to support or substantiate these allegations, and that there is complete anonymity granted to the people making these claims. So like I've said now, just to recap that, the fact that no one went to the police, that this has become, that these accusations have been levelled at Russell Brand via media outlets without any substantiated evidence to support these claims, whilst the accusers enjoy full anonymity. I have a major problem with that situation, and for me, it belittles the whole endeavour. Do you know what I mean by that? It makes me question the integrity of the whole investigation, because there are parameters of it, like I've just explained, that I don't trust. You know, and it's tied in, and I've heard this come up a couple of times, believe all women. And I understand that the core value of that statement to a degree. And maybe it should be more like hold all men accountable. But the idea that we should just believe all women is outrageous. And we know there is loads of evidence to support the idea that women, from time to time, make this stuff up for various reasons, either for a character assassination, to elevate their own status, etc etc etc. We know this happens. Everyone, no one could argue that. Man, woman, could not argue that. You know, from time to time this stuff is made up, and it destroys people's lives. It destroys some men's lives, and there are men out there who have had their lives destroyed by false allegations of rape and sexual assault. So I refuse to believe all women. I believe substantiated facts. That's what I believe. And I think that's a really important thing to keep believing. In my opinion, that's just for me. You can live your life any way you want. That'd be your prerogative. But my prerogative is to believe substantiated facts. So obviously we've talked about the accusations there within the documentary and the Irish and Sunday Times investigation, and I just like, are there other problems with the coverage, like as a whole, and this whole situation in and of itself? And I would argue that there are. Like, I think that this, well, number one, I think the way a friend of mine described it as an all hands on deck obliteration of Russell Brand, right? And I would agree with that statement or that sentiment, because, like I've said, as it stands, these are all accusations. It's not being substantiated in any way whatsoever. And that doesn't seem to be the case within the media coverage of this situation. I've seen red headlines that have called Russell Brand a demon. I've seen a headline in the Sunday Times that said, Russell Brand, the predator who hid in plain sight. And you might think, oh, what's wrong with that? That's so definitive. There's multiple levels of definition there. The predator, so that's it. We're not even going to question it. We're not waiting for a trial or a conviction. This is it. He's a predator. And he hid in plain sight. And we'll talk about that narrative now in a minute. But it's like, do you understand what I mean when I say that's a definitive statement? Because if he hid in plain sight, he did the thing. He's hiding a thing. And so there's no question then. It's just like, we know he is this. We know he did it in front of us, and we know, and that's that. And I have a huge problem with that being a headline of a nationally syndicated newspaper. I do. Because none of this is substantiated. These are all now just accusations. And surely the media should be the last bastion of sort of what's the word? Of being like this neutral provider of information, rather than telling us, this is what the story is. And at a glance, he's a predator. He's been doing it the whole time in plain sight of us all. Like I said, I saw Demon Brand. The Dispatch's documentary in and of itself, it's called In Plain Sight. To my understanding, that's an expose book written about Jimmy Savile. And this is not the only way in which Russell Brand is being connected with Jimmy Savile throughout this whole situation. And I think to even call the documentary that is so loaded. It's like, this guy's the new Jimmy Savile. You heard it here first. And it's like, no, this guy's been accused by 4 women of sexual assault and rape, and the accusations are questionable. That's the facts for me. That's the reality of the situation. But now mainstream media just gets to outright say it. He's a rapist. He's a predator. He's been at it ages. He's been doing it right in front of our eyes. And I just think that that's really dangerous. And, and because we can go, well, Russell Brand's just this guy. He's just a celebrity, millionaire. But this happens to normal, everyday lads from around your community, from around your area as well. And so, it's tricky stuff. Another way in which I found all the coverage, because no one is, and obviously the whole idea, the whole fact, and the point that I'm trying to make there is like, this is just accusations and allegations. Not that these are just some stupid allegations, but that's what they are, and that's all they are. They're not fact. And I think we need to be very careful supporting an environment where newspapers can broadcast accusations and allegations as fact. Another thing is, like, most stories that I've read allude to the fact that Russell Brand has a YouTube channel where he has garnered 6.6 million followers, and that this YouTube channel is where he sort of spouts his right-wing conspiracy diatribes from. This is where he attacks mainstream media and he undermines the establishment, etc. And the people who follow him are conspiracy theorists. The people who connect with what Russell Brand says, they're conspiracy theorists and they're cranks. One of the papers called it cranks. And for me, there's a couple of issues with that whole sentiment. Number one, it's really patronising, because just let's get our heads around this. The Dispatch's documentary had 1.8 million viewers. It had a viewership of 1.8 million people. And that is the highest viewership that Dispatches has enjoyed for years. That's my understanding of the situation. And for mainstream media, who can only drum up 1.8 million viewers, for them to call the 6.5 million people who watch Russell Brand's content on a daily basis conspiracy theorists is so patronising, and it's so indignant. And this is the problem, like we see, like I see in the Times Radio going, the response to these allegations is alarming, because people are calling it a trial by media. People are saying you can't make these accusations without substantiating them with any sort of evidence. And that's not and it's like, what's alarming to the Times is that people don't believe what they say. What's alarming to the Times is that people want to question the way in which they're doing this. Russell Brand is enjoying a much higher viewership than Channel 4. People are consuming his content more than they are consuming the Irish Times or the Sunday Times, the English Times, the Times and the Sunday Times content. People are digesting his content way more than they are Dispatch's content, and that's the reality of the situation. And there's an indignation at play there with regards to mainstream media's perspective on that situation. They just want to call all those people fucking conspiracy theorists and cranks, and again, it seems like it's going to just sort of further diminish the character of Russell Brand. And I've seen that in other ways. Like, there are stories coming out of Russell Brand that bear absolutely zero relative to these accusations, but they're just being told to you in order to lower your estimation of Russell Brand and his character, and therefore make you more inclined to believe these accusations of rape and sexual assault. That's what I feel is happening. These mainstream media outlets spent, like, no one came to them with these accusations. No one went to the police with these accusations. These accusations have come about as the result of 3 years of investigative journalism and interviews with hundreds and hundreds of people, ex-girlfriends, their friends and families, etc., etc., etc. And like, Russell Brand is a person who probably had sex with 1,000 women in his heyday, and now we have 4 women accusing him of rape and sexual assault. These 4 women were found by interviewing hundreds and hundreds of women. They were approached by these media outlets, and it's a bit of a poor result, in my opinion. And again, it makes it feel weighted. It makes it feel like you've gone after this guy. And why would you go after this guy? Could you potentially go after this guy because he is criticising mainstream media on a daily basis? He is criticising the government on a daily basis. He is criticising the banking system. He is criticising financial interests and the influence they have on foreign and domestic policy. And not only is he criticising all these things on a daily basis, people are connecting with what he is saying. And that, for me, is enough of a reason for these people to go after him. And I feel like we've seen this before. We saw it with Joe Rogan with the ivermectin thing. All of those media or news outlets went after Joe Rogan. They tried to tell us that he's promoting a horse dewormer. They tried to lower our estimation of Joe Rogan and his character. Why? Because he was getting like 40 million views a day on his podcast. He was fucking absolutely smashing CNN out of it. And there's that guy who Russell Brand took the piss out of. And it was very telling, his whole reaction to that situation, because he was like, well, how could these people believe him? Why doesn't anyone watch mainstream media? It's just like, because everyone knows you're shills for the establishment. Everyone knows you just want to promote an establishment narrative. He's have no integrity from a journalistic point of view. And that's what people are. And people aren't stupid. They can see it. And that's why you've had an alarming response to these accusations, because you haven't gone about it in a way that involves integrity in any way. You haven't gone about it in a way that people can respect, you know? Are there parts, and again, yeah, there's a whole part, and we'll talk about sort of irrelevant parts of this narrative now in a minute, but there was a bit in the documentary where they're likening him, I suppose, to Jimmy Savile. They're certainly wheeling out this phone call that he had with Jimmy Savile where he offers up his assistant to Jimmy Savile as some sort of like key piece of evidence that he is a fucking nefarious historical fucking rapist who's been going around abusing the power balance and his position of power in order to be a misogynist and a rapist and a sexual assaulter and all. So I think that's fucking shocking, and like I said with the in plain sight thing. But there's a whole section in that documentary, in the Dispatches production, about his time at BBC Radio 2 that sort of wraps up the culmination of this segment, is like the Andrew Sachs thing, Saxgate, and how terrible that was. And I was just like, that was dealt with 10 years ago, more, 15 years ago. Russell Brand quit. A station controller lost their job. What's his name? Jonathan Ross, who's now totally back in the fold. He was suspended for a period of time. And so the point I'm trying to make is that that's irrelevant to this situation. That's a situation that was dealt with. People were punished for that situation. Now you want to exhume it and bring it back from the dead like Weekend at Bernie's and fucking parade it around like it's evidence to support the idea that he's a rapist. It's outrageous. And obviously Georgina Bailey, who is the granddaughter in question, who Russell Brand fucked, apparently, she is saying that Russell Brand is not a rapist, and in fact she speaks not highly, but she doesn't speak acrimoniously of Russell Brand. I mean, he paid for her to go through rehab 5 years ago. She has been clean as a result of that altruistic fucking display of compassion by Russell Brand. And so, like I said, just why bother putting that whole bit in, you know? There's another bit in the documentary where they have this PA, and she's the only woman in the whole thing who goes on unanonymously, just goes on as herself with her own name right there in front of the camera. And she goes on to paint this picture of like a sordid, perverted Russell Brand who has a rotating door of women. He's having sex with 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9, 10 women a day, and how it was lurid and sordid and highly sexual. But she also concedes that she never worried about consent with the women she saw being involved with Russell Brand. They were throwing themselves at her. And another major issue that she has is that he was showing photos of naked women, photos that women had sent to him in order to entice him into some sort of sexual endeavour. He's now at the bar showing these naked photos to his friends, and she even has a look, and they're all having a giggle until she sees someone she knows. And then it's like, this is a terrible thing. This is this terrible thing. These poor women don't know that he's showing his mates these photos. I would argue that those women are sexually harassing Russell Brand. That sending naked photos to Russell Brand in order to entice him into a sexual endeavour is potentially even sexual assault. And the only reason you now took exception to it is because you saw someone you knew and you felt bad. And you wanted to project how you felt, what your behaviour within that dynamic. Because you were looking at it going, oh, give us a look. Until you saw someone you knew. And then you felt bad. And in order to repent or project that, or you just wanted to deflect it, basically, is the point I'm trying to make, onto Russell Brand. And that for me is totally irrelevant. You've just conceded that you didn't think consent is an issue with any of these women. Get the fuck off the documentary. You know what I mean? And again, an editorial duty to present the facts and to present what's relative to the accusations. Not just some sort of like, again, thing in order for us to go, oh, I'm not down with that. In order to diminish Russell Brand's character. I think it's irrelevant, and I think it's sensational, and it shouldn't have been part of the documentary. There's also a whole segment, a really confusing segment, a poorly produced segment of the documentary where 3 anonymous, faceless, nameless runners and crew members from God knows when, chronologically speaking, tell us stories, the same sort of stories about highly sexualized Russell Brand and a conveyor belt of willing of age women having sex with him. And then they'd say things like, he used to point women out and make us get their numbers. It's like, yeah, that's what any lad in that situation would do, or most lads, single dudes without a care in the world, would do in that situation. Going, I'm going to try and fuck her, and I'm going to try and fuck her, and I'm going to try and fuck her. It's been happening since the dawn of time, and I'm sick of women of age in these situations having sex with these celebrities, and then 10 years later making wild accusations of either abuse of the power balance or emotionally abusive. It's just like, take some responsibility for yourselves. And again, if there's no fear or implication of unconsensual sex in any of this segment, why is it even in it? I'll tell you why. It's in it again to make us further diminish the fucking character of Russell Brand, to make us more susceptible to the idea that he could be a rapist. And I think that's sensationalist, and I think it's weighted and irrelevant. And there's a part of it that has a serious hole in it. One of the girls is like, I distinctly remember women ringing me the next day in tears, mainly, there's a bit in it where a woman goes, I distinctly remember receiving phone calls from women the next day, women whom I had given Russell Brand's details to, them ringing me the next day in tears because he hadn't called them back, because they had felt used effectively, that he had sex with them, that he had promised to call them back and never did, and now they regret that sexual decision. And my perceived hole in that story is that you gave them Russell Brand's details, he met them, had sex with them, promised to call them, never called them back, and then they rang you back the next day upset about that situation. So all of this played out over a 24-hour period. I suppose I find it unbelievable that a woman would become upset within a 24-hour period because a lover whom she had just had sex with didn't call her back. And if a woman did get upset, if I was with a girl and I said, hey, give me a call, baby, and then I didn't call her in that 24-hour period, the same 24-hour period in which we had had sex, and she starts texting me going, you said you'd call me, you bastard. I'd be like, red flag. thank God I didn't call this bitch. She used to go blocked. You know what I mean? And the other hole in that whole narrative is like, how did they have your phone number? You're just a production assistant who gave your Russell Brand's details to these women. Did you at the same time, in turn, give your own details? Just in case there was some dissatisfaction and they needed to report it? Were you friends with them? Did you know these women previously? I highly doubt both of those options. And so, yeah, I thought their whole segment as confusing and as anonymous as what. There wasn't even fake names for these bitches. It was just like faceless, nameless voices telling us these stories of disrepute, basically. And again, it's just like, it bears no relevance. And then the final part of the segment of the documentary that I found to be totally irrelevant was this comedian, Daniel Sloss. And he comes on, and he's only in the thing for about 2.5, 3 minutes, and he basically just goes, oh, I could tell you a few stories. Yeah, oh man, Russell Brand's a bad dude. I've heard a few stories, and I heard them from these people and these people. So they must be true. I'm telling you, I could tell you a thing or two. It's just like, now's the time, mate. This is an expose documentary about the sexual exploits of Russell Brand. Don't tell us you could tell us a few stories. Tell us a few stories. Then he goes on to say that there's this WhatsApp group that's been set up by female comedians to warn each other about predatory comedians, male comedians within the circuit. And he knows Russell Brand's name has been in that group. And then it just says, the screen goes back. A journalist has seen these photos or has seen one of these WhatsApp messages. It's just like, you're just telling us that you've seen a photo or seen a screenshot of a group that mentions Russell Brand that's just other women telling each other to be careful. Like, none of it is based in fact. None of what you've said. And it's like 6 degrees of separation, and not one part of it is rooted in any sort of substantiated evidence. That's like, come on. It's just like, it just feels like journalistic integrity has fallen by the wayside on more than one occasion throughout this whole endeavour. There's numerous other parts or arms of this situation, coverage with regards to this situation that is irrelevant. Like, I've seen headlines that read like things like Laura Gallagher, Russell Brand's wife, 13 years his junior, stands by him, ... for now. And like, I know that sounds pretty innocuous or whatever, but it's just like, it's irrelevant that she's 13 years his junior, especially considering she's 35 and he's 48 and they've got 3 kids together. They're married now. It's irrelevant that she's 13 years his junior. And why would you even put that in? And then I was like, oh, right, she stands by him for now. And the quote from a source close to them says, she stands by her husband. End quote. And then it goes ... and the publication right for now. And then they present that to you in the headline like it's part of the facts, like part of the story. And there are numerous other, like even just like Lorraine Kelly, another headline, I remember when Russell Brand called me a shit. And it's just like, no one cares, Lorraine. It's irrelevant. Shut up, will you? Stop wheeling out these like these stories that are designed to galvanise this sort of diminished view of Russell Brand and his character. If anything, I feel like it's blown up in your face. It looks worse when you just sort of roll out this conjecture and these hearsay and these, my brother's sister's mother's friend heard that Russell Brand is an X, Y, and Z. Like, people aren't stupid. It makes them question the integrity of the whole endeavour, myself included. There's other parts of this situation as well that seem to me to be totally hypocritical, right? And they keep intersplicing throughout this Dispatches production like risque or clips of Russell Brand's risque comedy interviews, etc. Just keep showing clips of his like extremely flirtatious yet charming behaviour with women on daytime television and all this. And there's women saying now in retrospect 15 years later that was totally inappropriate. And it's just like, hold on a minute, that's absolute bullshit. Because the reality of it is, it's like, you were creaming yourselves on Morning Joe. Laura Ingle was creaming herself on daytime television being interviewed, or within an interview of Russell Brand. And there are countless instances of that. And I just think it's totally hypocritical for women now to turn around and go, oh yeah, that was unacceptable. And there's even in this insinuation that anyone who laughed, the women you see laughing in those clips of his stand-up comedy, they're uncomfortable. I was just like, again, take some responsibility. And I have a problem with you 15 years later judging someone on behaviour that you didn't judge them on back then. And the other side of that is we champion women who talk like that. We champion women who push the boundaries of appropriate behaviour and who are foul-mouthed. Like, look, Joan Rivers, Whitney Cummings, and the list goes on. We love it. But when Russell Brand does it, it's misogynistic, it's sexist, and even though we laughed at it at the time, it's totally unacceptable, and it's another piece of evidence to support the idea that he's a rapist. That for me is crazy, you know? I think it's hypocritical from an institutional level as well, because obviously whoever it was that Russell Brand was in the employ of was making these, slightly outrageous jokes and sentiments and statements and answers to questions in interviews, etc. Those same people whom Russell Brand was in the employ of are now going after Russell Brand. And like, even with the thing with the Jimmy Savile, he offered up his assistant. That's totally unacceptable. He offered up to Jimmy Savile, and Jimmy Savile's a monster. And obviously we know Jimmy Savile's a monster, who was protected by the establishment, who was given the keys to Broadmoor so he could rape basket cases, constrained in beds and stuff like this. We know that he was well in with the royal family, etc. And so then it's like, and we know he was a monster, and then it's like, oh look, Russell Brand offered up his assistant to this monster. He is a monster. It's just like, he made a joke that actually was funny, and it's obvious that he's taking the piss, and to a degree taking the piss out of Jimmy Savile. And the BBC executives, that was just a pre-recorded bit, signed off on that bit and allowed it to go out on air. And now they want to... Oh, I've lost myself there. But the point of he's offered this girl up to... he is in fact a monster himself. And it's obvious it's a joke. And in fact, it's obviously funny. And obviously people connect with it. And obviously that's why BBC Radio have employed Russell Brand as some sort of shock jock. A British counterpart to Howard Stern, potentially. And also, the onus is on him to shock and to keep pushing this envelope. That's what his job is. And now the same people who gave him that job and paid him all that money to be that person want to say that person, in fact, is a rapist. That behaviour is symptomatic of rape culture and rape itself. I think that's totally hypocritical on an institutional level. And we should spot that and go... You can't have your cake and eat it too. You just want to make money at every fucking avenue. That's what's actually going on with this whole coverage, in my opinion. Because if Dispatches or the Times, the Sunday Times, wanted to help these women, if their priority was justice, they would have helped these women bring this through the judicial system and then reported on it. Had a fucking deal in place that they would get to break the story when the story is breakable, when the story has been confirmed. But the thing about it is that these people, Dispatches and the Times, they don't give a fuck about that. They don't give a fuck about real justice for these women. They want to sell papers. They want the most sensational scoop they can think of and sell papers, and in turn damage the character and the whatever of a person who was causing them a bit of trouble and strife, who was actually damaging to their bottom line. That's what's, in my opinion, happening here. This motherfucker is damaging our bottom line. We are gonna fuck him up. And we are going to increase our bottom line while we do it. I mean, it's actually a wet dream for these dudes. Look, do I think Russell Brand is guilty? I'm going to pin my colours to the mast and say no. I heard a woman say that, look, let's be real here. Russell Brand was horrid and he was a creep and a sleazebag, but he wasn't a rapist. And this is a woman of the time. She's on Great British News, GBN. I can't remember her name, but she's like, going, let's be real here. Women were throwing themselves at it. I think there's not enough evidence to substantiate these claims. There are holes in the whole situation / investigation. And I feel that the Russell Brand is probably a person who didn't need to rape anyone from a sexual exploit situation. He was getting to probably fulfill every lurid fantasy he had on a daily basis, multiple times. I also think, and I've said this already, maybe I'm wrong to entertain this thought process, but I do think there's an issue when every single one of the women who accused Russell Brand of sexual assault and rape was already in a consensual sexual relationship with him or had already had consensual sex with him. And you're talking about a guy, like I said, who had sex with potentially 1,000, if not more, women, and to interview hundreds of them and to come up with 4 sort of weak, unsubstantiated claims of sexual assault and rape, 2 of which I think have to be just stricken from the record automatically, then it makes me believe Russell and not the accusers, not the accusations, you know. I believe Russell Brand to be a person of integrity. I have no doubt that is a newfound integrity, an integrity that he has developed and gesticulated over the last 10, 11, 12 years. I think the statute of limitations when it comes to his lack of integrity years ago would probably be like being a sleazebag, being a creep, coming on to women in a very forward way, like just being very obviously interested in having sex with women. And for me, this is none of that. Being a sleazebag or obviously interested in sex with women, in pursuing women for sex, that doesn't make you a sexual assault or a sexual assaulter or a rapist, in my opinion. And I believe that that's probably what Russell Brand was, and I believe that Russell Brand probably looks back at who he was and the sort of ways in which he was creepy or sleazy and cringes now, because I do feel, having watched him for the last 10 years, that he has changed his path, that he has started to walk a righteous path. And I think that now that righteous path is infringing upon the interests of corporate media, it's infringing upon the interests of establishment government, it's infringing upon the interests of big business, that they're going to fucking get that guy 100%. And I think that there has been a concerted effort across the board to get the guy, and that these accusations have been hijacked just to get the fucking guy. And I think there's evidence to support that, like the fact that YouTube, at the behest of the British government, have demonetized Russell Brand's YouTube account is pretty damning. I think the fact that a member of parliament wrote to Rumble and asked them to deplatform Russell Brand in light of accusations, unsubstantiated accusations, is fucking outrageous. That is outrageous. That's censorship on a pretty grand scale, and it's something I feel that we'd have to worry about. Surely that's something we have to worry about. Surely the idea that anyone who questions the narrative that's being given to us by mainstream media, questions the narrative of an establishment that lets normal everyday people fall between the cracks, surely the fact that these people, they try to deplatform, that the government tries to deplatform these people, that mainstream media tries to deplatform these people, that's really fucking alarming and something we should be really careful of. Because as far as I'm concerned, Russell Brand's main interest has been to communicate the injustices that are being perpetrated against normal everyday people at the hands of big business, big tech, government, political and financial elites, like. And not only that, but I think it is important to hold on to the idea that people are innocent until proven guilty, and we shouldn't accept trial by media. And that's exactly what this has been. And you would say, oh no, hold on, how? It is a trial by media, because no one has reported any of this stuff to the police, no one has tried to seek any real justice for these alleged crimes. And I have a huge problem with that. I've said it already, I'm going to say it again. I have a huge problem with accusations being made 10, 15 years after the fact without any substantiated evidence to back them up, and for media outlets to be allowed to present these as fact, and for us then, you know, for our opinion to become he's a rapist. The Times have just told us Russell Brand's a rapist. It's a fact. He's a predator who hid in plain sight. I think that's really fucking dangerous, and I have a fucking massive problem with it. And I don't trust the integrity or the interests of mainstream media. I don't trust the integrity of the establishment, and I certainly don't trust it when the government gets involved to try and deplatform people who critique the government, who critique the mainstream media, who critique the financial systems we have in place, and do so on behalf of normal everyday people. Like, I mean, it's a fucking serious red flag for me when the government, when Parliament tries to shut that down. And just to reiterate and hammer home the idea that we really cannot live in a world where trial by media is the new accepted norm. We need for things to be substantiated. We need for people to be innocent until proven guilty, because the fact of the matter is that this stuff happens often. And now, obviously, rape and fucking physical abuse against women happens often as well, and that's deplorable. And no one, or well, certainly not me or anyone who I associate with, would offer an argument to the contrary, you know. And so, but at the same time, it's equally deplorable for people to make accusations against innocent parties, knowing full well that they're innocent, in order to assassinate their character or destroy their careers, their families, their livelihoods. Like Russell Brand, like I've said, has a wife and 3 kids, and this could be really destructive to his life. And obviously, if he's done these things, then fair enough, but I don't believe he has done these things. And at the moment, as it stands, there has been no evidence to substantiate or support these accusations. And obviously, if it turns out to be true, we'll have to address this situation again. But for now, I just want to say that I stand with Russell Brand here at Talkin Guff, and I think it's actually important for accountability. It's important for women. It's important for the struggles that women have against a finite group of nefarious men, that these situations don't go unchecked, that we don't encourage or engage with trial by media. Listen, I love you all. Peace out.
And ways consist of simple things, the days of black and white. And faces from a humble past, at one with the ground, the sound. And